Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, October the 29th, 2024. Today we have a Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn aspect. I think this aspect could be important. I talked a bit about it yesterday because yesterday we had Venus square Saturn. Now we've got Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, and I think it could mean that today is somewhat difficult. It may be difficult to get things done, and there may be a certain sense of frustration. And at the same time, there are a few famous people who might be impacted by this aspect, and I'll be looking at their charts. If you look at the thumbnail, we've got Ali Khamenei, who is the supreme leader of Iran. I think he could be impacted. Also Elon Musk, and there are a few other people. So before I look in detail at this aspect, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, October the 29th, 2024. Usual reminder, if you like the video, I'd be very grateful if you were to just indicate this fact that you really did like it. And if you're not subscribed, I would be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. Anyway, let's look at what's going on today. There aren't actually so many aspects. Yes, the Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is there. That sort of dominates the day. But as far as other things that are going on, well, the moon moves into Libra. You can see that at noon today, set for New York, the moon is at 5:39 Libra. London time, the moon went into Libra at 4:30 in the morning. So if you're in the Americas or Europe or Africa, really the moon is going to be in Libra all day. But if you're sort of in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, it's sort of maybe sort of later in the day that the moon changes sign, moves out of Virgo, moves into Libra. Of course, when I say all day, moon goes into Libra, London time, 4:30 in the morning. I suppose if you're up really early or up really late, depending on your perspective, then there might be a sort of bit of a moon in Virgo feel. But I think to make things simpler, we can say that in Europe, moon is going to be in Libra all day. And certainly the case if you're in the Americas. Now, just before the moon moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Pluto. So moon trine Pluto, it's a fast-moving aspect. The moon does move quickly. So there may be a sense that we feel we have to change something, or we may be sort of focusing on our feelings a little and the intensity and transformative power of our feelings. I suppose that's possible, but it is a trine. It's not a square or an opposition. So I would have expected the influence of this moon trine Pluto to be fairly fleeting. Now, the main aspect today is Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. So Mars is at 28:1 Cancer. Saturn is at 12:56 Pisces. Now, I really must emphasize, if you're doing astrology, I know it's kind of easier to spot trines, squares, conjunctions, oppositions. It's easy to spot them by eye, and the semi-squares and sesquiquadrates are not so easy to spot, but they really are important aspects. I'm not convinced you can really read a chart fully if you don't use semi-squares and sesquiquadrates. And I think it's just important, if you don't use them, to just get used to spotting them. They're not so difficult to spot. I mean, to spot one, you just sort of add 15, but I'll talk about that later in the video. But there is this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, and Mars is a planet of how we assert ourselves, and Saturn can be something that's in the way, and that might be why it just feels to be a day when we just can't quite make things happen. Now, that's the position in New York, set for noon. Moon is at 25:39 Libra, And for the sake of balance, let's look at Australia and New Zealand, set for Sydney. You can see that at noon, the moon is at 28 Virgo. This is what I mean by saying it. If you're in East Asia or Australia or New Zealand, there will be a considerable chunk of the day when the moon is in Virgo. And so if you are in Australasia or East Asia, there might be a change over the course of the day. Moon moving from moon in Virgo, perhaps just being a little bit focused on material things, the way things feel, what they look like, and the details of them, perhaps. And particularly with Moon trine Pluto. Moon trine Pluto can be quite obsessed about detail. And I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? And Moon is in an Earth sign, and though Moon is the only personal planet in an Earth sign, so maybe if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you're perhaps going to be a little more grounded today than if, say, you're in the Americas or in Western Europe. So there is some difference in experience in terms of Australia and New Zealand, and and the rest of the world. I think in Australia and New Zealand, that Moon trine Pluto that I talked about is going to be, I think, more prominent, and the small things might matter. You notice small things out of the corner of your eye, and you realise that they're not quite as small as they looked. They're not quite as small as they seem. Turning to the heliocentric picture, and here we go, heliocentric picture is there. Okay, there is the heliocentric picture. So we had yesterday, day before, we had Mars square Saturn. So Mars, heliocentrically, Mars is at 1824 Gemini, square Saturn at 1742 Pisces. There's still a feeling that Mars is square Saturn. There is that feeling of frustration. And it's quite difficult to distinguish the heliocentric square between Mars and Saturn and the geocentric sesquiquadrate. So this emphasizes my point, but it is very much a Mars-Saturn day, whether you look at it as from a heliocentric or a geocentric point of view. So just don't expect things to be easy. Things might require a lot of work, and there may be a lot of frustration on the way, but I suppose you look at Mars-Saturn in a positive sense, and I suppose Mars-Saturn can get to grips with things, can decide what's important, decide to focus on certain things and give it everything it's got. So there might be a persistence to Mars and Saturn, which in certain situations could be quite useful. As far as other stuff going on, Mercury for Capricorn, heliocentric Mercury making a trine to the Earth. There's the Earth at 6 Taurus. So Mercury trine Earth today and perhaps tomorrow. I mean, that's relatively fortunate. Mercury is the communication planet. It's trining the Earth. So if we find a way of saying things, if we find the right words, I do think that we can have an impact, and we will be able to get people to understand what we're talking about. I mean, they might not like or appreciate or agree with what we're talking about, but at least we can get the words out. So let's now look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So aspect-wise, there's not a lot going on. So I'm kind of hoping that I can keep my forecasts for the 12 signs relatively brief. So these are my forecast for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, October the 29th, 2024. Aries, there is a change happening. The moon is sort of moving out of Virgo and into Libra. And, with the moon moving into Libra, you kind of feel, I think, more sociable, I would have said, better able to deal with people. And I think you're going to be sort of a little bit less focused on small things which may not be in the grand scheme of things very important, but somehow you just can't stop looking at them, and you've wanted to get things absolutely right, and you didn't feel right about it, but you just perhaps couldn't help yourself, and there might have been a slightly obsessive feel about it. But I think with Moon in Libra, you are to an extent able to sort of calm down a little and perhaps relate to people better, though there is still a sense of frustration that you're not able to quite see things through. I mean, the reason for this frustration would, of course, be the fact that Mars, which is your ruler, is sesquiquadrate Saturn, geocentrically, and heliocentrically, Mars is square Saturn. So, Mars is you, and it's aspecting Saturn, so it's difficult to get things done. Things don't happen at the speed at which you would like them to happen. And of course, being an Aries, you do want things to happen at a certain speed, and you like to be able to, you like to be able to be impulsive. You like to be able to do whatever comes to mind, and so that is somewhat frustrating for you, the fact that things don't move as fast as you'd like. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. You can't expect everything to be going at 1,000 miles an hour all the time, and just taking your time to do things and not feeling that you need immediate results and you need an immediate response. I don't think you need that. And you can still make good progress. And just don't forget, the social dimension, because with Moon in Libra, I think it's a time when you can be paying more attention to people, and perhaps to an extent, it might be a good idea to let them take the initiative, but only up to a point. I say this because, the Moon is in Libra, but it's conjunct the South Node. And so with Moon conjunct the South Node, there's actually a slight danger that you give people too much power. That's not something that Arians normally do, but perhaps you'll just want to say, well, let other people take the initiative. But okay, up to a point, but only up to a point. You have to monitor the situation, and you always have to be ready to step in if things don't exactly go your way. Now, another thing, Aries, is that you may feel when just looking at everything around you, that you have something to contribute. That you have something to contribute that is quite unusual, almost revolutionary. It's kind of brewing up in you. And you feel that it is really important, but you also realize how difficult it is to be a revolutionary. Being a revolutionary is always hard work. People don't want to listen. People, I suppose, they prefer to think that, the government is right. You can see this at a local level. If you look at people living in a community in which I'm living, the city, the city of Lakewood, Washington. People in this city really, really want to trust the city council. And the city bureaucracy. They really want to do that. It just makes things so much easier. They even sometimes resent it if you suggest that the city have got things wrong. And when the city reassure them, they think that's great. They do trust what local bureaucrats say. And that perhaps is the kind of problem you might be having. Okay, it's not going to be the same problem, but however revolutionary you want to be, most people are going to want to go for the status quo. They're going to want to believe authority, accept authority. And maybe for you, at the moment, you might find that very frustrating, because you really do feel that you've got a different perspective that is very different from the established narrative. So what do I advise? Well, you just have to be subtle, and you have to understand other people's weaknesses, and rather than just get annoyed with people, you have to give them time to understand your message and to understand what you're trying to say and what you're trying to communicate. Yeah, but in the end, if you don't lose your temper, I think you should prevail. And I'm not necessarily talking about today. It may take days, may take weeks for you to prevail, but if you keep pushing the same message, that revolutionary spirit in you, yeah, it can be constructive and it can be meaningful, and yeah, it can get results. Taurus, you are still feeling to an extent the aspect between Venus and Saturn. I mean, I talked yesterday about the fact that Venus was square Saturn, and with Venus square Saturn, there may be a certain feeling of frustration that you're unable to get things done as fast as you'd like them to happen. It just may be that something is holding you back, and it's bothering you that it's holding you back, but there's perhaps not much you can do about it, and you just have to kind of accept the situation. And yeah, it's just very important that you don't get annoyed, that you don't get angry. And I would suggest that you don't necessarily spend too much time with other people, particularly friends, associates, colleagues, whatever. If you spend too much time with them, they're going to grind you to a halt in the end. Okay, maybe not as badly as yesterday, but it's still there, this Venus square Saturn. So do have some respect for your own need for independence, and at the same time, Taurus, don't doubt yourself. Venus is on it's aspecting the Mars-Pluto midpoint. So Mars-Pluto as a pair can be quite powerful. It can have a strong sense of your own power, and with your own power, you can in the end, you can create some big effects. Now, it may not be easy, but if you're persistent and if you decide that something is really important, yeah, I am confident that you really can make it happen. And it may just be that Taurean willpower. When Taurus decides that Taurus wants something, nothing can stop Taurus. Taurus is of all the 12 signs, is possibly the most persistent, maybe with the exception of Scorpio, but Taurians can be very, very persistent, and they can see things through to the end. Now, the moon is changing sign. Moon is moving out of Virgo into Libra, and I think with the moon moving into Libra, there's a sense in which you feel that your own inner harmony is important. It's about feeling a sense of balance, and I mean balance in terms of how you and your body and your mind, they just relate to everything else. And you want balance, and you'll be looking for balance. And if there's disharmony around you, if you're in an environment which isn't to your liking, I think that could undermine you quite quickly. I'm not talking about seriously undermining you, but still, it's not great. So always seek out what is harmonious. And sometimes what is harmonious can be also what appears on the surface to be boring. But so what? The thing is about if there's harmony. It's like, I don't know. It's like when you're having a panic attack, isn't it? I mean, I haven't had a serious panic attack for decades, but when I do remember with a panic attack, if you're having a panic attack, and the moment you know that your panic attack is starting to subside is when you feel bored. At least that's in my experience. You sit there, you're in a state of panic, and you don't do anything. And it's certainly not boring. But the moment you do feel bored, you kind of know that the panic is subsiding. because boredom and panic, they're kind of polar opposites to each other. So maybe Taurus, a little bit of boredom might be a good sign, because it may be a sign actually that things are moving back into sync with each other. So that's something that you should do. I think put yourself and your well-being and your health and your sense of balance, that needs to be given priority. And don't focus on other people unless it's absolutely appropriate. If you're dealing with people who are harmonious, who make you feel good, who make you feel comfortable, that's absolutely fine. But some people could just be more trouble than they're worth. And the key thing today is to just look after yourself. Gemini, the moon is moving into Libra. And Gemini, I think that is something that you should be welcoming, because Libra is an air sign. Libra is a sign that has a natural affinity with Gemini. So with moon moving into Libra, you just may feel more comfortable, and also I think a little more creative and able to tune into what you're good at. And I think that in some respects you may be taking yourself and the world around you a little less seriously, and that's good. A bit of levity might actually, Gemini, be quite a good thing. And I think you're helped by the fact that you're going to be fairly sort of action orientated. You'll feel that you can do things, and I think that could be, in a way, a bit of a relief. Mercury, your ruler, has been moving through Scorpio. It's still moving through Scorpio. Okay, soon enough, Mercury will be into Sagittarius. That sort of provides some new excitement. But at the moment, in Scorpio, there have been times when Mercury in Scorpio for you has been not typically Gemini, a sort of bit too introspective, a little too downbeat. But at the moment, I think that there is a spark. There's a sense of enthusiasm on your part, a belief that actually you're in a position to make things happen, and that you can get results, and your dynamism and your enthusiasm could actually be very useful. Now, if you happen to be working today, or if you've got a career, or if you've got a job, then it may be the case that it is somewhat frustrating. The problem is that there is this Saturn, Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. I mean, Saturn is in Pisces. Saturn is sort of going through, as I often say, it's going through a high-profile part of your chart. Saturn in Pisces is about you trying to create a path for yourself. It's trying to create structure for yourself, perhaps structure in terms of your ambitions, what you're trying to do. But something is disturbing that structure. Something is irritating it, and you have to attend to it, I think, in many cases. And it could be someone or something being concerned about an issue that you don't really want to have to worry about. I mean, it could be something financial, for example. Just some bother, some irritation that is just preventing you from doing what you really want to do. But I think, Gemini, the key thing is not to take it too seriously, but not to be completely dismissive. So if anything comes up that you don't like the look of, don't like the sound of, then give it some attention. But don't give it all of your attention. Just do what is necessary to sort the thing out and to put things on a stable footing. Cancer. So Cancer, we have the moon in Libra, or at least the moon moving into Libra. And I think with the moon moving into Libra, it does feel as if you want some kind of peace. I mean, Libra is a sign connected with peace and harmony and being settled, and I think that's really what you're going to be looking for, or just feel that that's the right way to go, and that I think is certainly going to be your line of least resistance. To, for example, you might want to decline things. If in doubt, you don't do it. You taking the easy path. I think that's kind of what Cancerians are going to want to do today, and it just feels right, sort of in a spiritual sense, and also, in a sense of what is good for you. And I think that's okay, but only up to a point. There's some danger, Cancer, that you try too hard to get comfortable, and in the process you might be maybe neglecting other things that do need your attention. They might not require a lot of attention, but I think there is a set of expectations. Certain people, maybe certain organizations, are expecting something of you, and I think to ignore these expectations would probably be unwise. I think that you might be creating a bad impression, and I suppose you might be neglecting your duty. I mean, there is a sense of duty here, and if you just focus on yourself, and there's just danger that you become sort of overindulgent. Okay, not overindulgent in the sense of eating, drinking, spending money, all that kind of stuff, but overindulgent in terms of just getting entwined in your own security and what makes you feel comfortable. And there is a world out there which you at least need to pay attention to. Now, another thing going on today is that we have Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. Mars is still moving through your sign. Set for New York, Mars is at 28 degrees 1 minute Cancer. In other words, 2 degrees. Mars just has to move 2 degrees before it moves out of your sign, and Mars is moving slowly, so it's not going to happen for a few days. I mean, let me just tell you when Mars actually does move out of Cancer, just so we can be sure it's actually takes place on the 4th. So that's going to be in a week. So Monday of next week, the day before the election, Mars moves out of Cancer, at least the American election. Sorry to be so US centric, but Mars is potentially a little bit of a problem, and I think that Mars might make you a little too defensive, a little too anxious to protect your own interests, especially as it is sesquiquadrate Saturn. And if you're too defensive, you might cause upset. It's kind of, I've already sort of suggested this, but Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, there may be people you do have to notice and pay attention to. And at least you may have to be polite, and you need to keep people sort of on side. And Cancer can sometimes be quite a moody sign, and I mean, I know that's a horrible stereotype that all of us can be moody, but it's fine to have moods, and one should accept one's moods. I mean, yeah, we all have moods. I'm not a Cancer, and okay, I have Venus in Cancer, so perhaps I'm sort of infected. I have something about me that has a slight, somewhat Cancerian, but Cancer isn't really my own experience. But that moodiness, if there is any moodiness, it mustn't really be picked up too much by other people, and you don't want to just create the wrong impression. Someone might find you a little bit off-putting unless you make a little bit of an effort. So Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn it's a difficult energy for all of us, but for you, you don't want to be defensive in the wrong ways, or more defensive than you have to be. You know, someone might be annoying today, but you might need them tomorrow. So from the perspective of self-interest, don't inflict your moods onto other people unless you really feel that there is no choice. Leo, you're in some respects today a little bit serious. You understand that, you know, there are things happening that are not light, that can't be underestimated or discounted, and as far as you're concerned, they could restrict your freedom of action, and it just feels that you feel perhaps you're in a world where there isn't so much freedom. And I don't mean that in a political sense. It's just a world perhaps where people have their roles, people have things they can do, but there are also a lot of things they can't do. And I think you can really feel that. And maybe you can also feel it in terms of other people, just other people feeling that their freedom is being restricted, and it's a tense day in that sense, and it's just not helped by the fact that we have got we've got Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. It just is that feeling of frustration. But at the same time, I think that your ability to communicate is going to be quite good. Remember that the moon is moving into Libra, and Libra is a sign that from a Leo perspective is very constructive. It's constructive in the sense that it can think constructively, and it can communicate constructively, and it may be that through the things you say, you can kind of restore the balance, and that's what you should be doing. So, in fact, I think the words come quite easily, and yes, Leo, people are going to listen, and I think you can actually be quite comforting. But of course, words for the sake of words are perhaps of limited value, and so Leo, there may come a point where you're asking yourself, where is this all going? And what you don't want to do is talk too much. And in fact, I think you could talk too much. And the problem with talking too much is not just a volume issue. It's a content issue, and it may be that there's a danger that you just focus on small things at the expense of the issues that really matter. And there may be things that have to be said or should be said, but you just don't want to say it. You feel that it's just not appropriate, and all you want is to keep everyone happy, and it just overall feels unsatisfactory. And I think, Leo, at a certain point, you should be saying something that might be a little bit controversial. It might be something that no one is expecting, but you say it, and that creates movement. and you'll be thanked for it. But there is this temptation just to focus on keeping everyone happy. And that's just so temporary. Yeah, sure, we can be happy in the short term, but what about the longer term? We have to start thinking about the future. And if you can start to address yourself to issues of the future today, despite your reservations, I think that in the end would be in everyone's best interests. Virgo, you are not entirely satisfied with the way things are going, with the way things are moving, and you do think that things really could be better. They could be improved on, and that feeling needs to be worked on. You need to be ready to, make things happen. Because I don't think anyone else is going to make things happen. Other people are sort of wrapped up in their own issues, and they just don't feel that now is the time to sort of move forward. But you feel it differently. You have actually a lot of energy at your disposal. I mean, in some respects, you are one of the most energetic of the 12 signs. Even though Mercury, your ruler, is in Scorpio, you don't associate Mercury in Scorpio with high energy. But in your case right now, there is something energetic about it. And, it may be connected, for example, with the fact that, Mercury is starting to make a trine to Mars. I mean, it's quite subtle, but, we've got Mercury at 24 Scorpio, Mars at 28 Cancer. It's 4 degrees apart, but you're starting to pick up on it, and you feel that things are changing, and you feel that you want to do something to get things moving. And perhaps one way of getting things moving is to say something. At least that might be what feels most comfortable. You say something, you make a suggestion, but that might not be enough. It might actually be a time, Virgo, where you have to be ready to do something. You maybe do something that wasn't expected, that people hadn't thought about. And people don't just theorize about what's possible. They now see it in practice, because you have put something into action. And as soon as you put something into action, in a way, Virgo, that could change everything. And we could see real movement. And in terms of other people, it's important that you are ready to take the initiative. If you let other people take the initiative, I'm not sure anything particularly spectacular would happen. Some people are feeling that they can't do anything. Other people are actually a little bit deluded. They can't see what's really going on, so they're not actually in a position to do anything useful. And if they do try to do things off their own bat, then that might actually be worse than useless. So perhaps, Virgo, you need to appreciate your position and the fact that you are able to make things happen. And it may actually be a time, Virgo, when you have to lead by example. Libra, Moon is moving into your sign, and that is, I suppose, something to be welcomed, because the moon has been in Virgo, and with the moon in Virgo, you possibly wanted to, I suppose, keep some things to yourself, and you felt that now wasn't really the time to reveal the full truth or to be open and honest about what you wanted. But now with the moon moving into Libra, okay, I understand that if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon won't be in Libra until relatively late in the day. I think in the afternoon, it moves into Libra sort of in the afternoon, I think. Maybe even early evening if you're in New Zealand. I'm not quite sure. I haven't checked that. But with the moon moving into Libra, if you're certainly if you're in the Americas, in Europe, Middle East, Africa, moon moving into Libra is just going to give you a new impetus. You'll feel that now is the time, and that you can move forward. But the question is, where exactly are you going? And the issue is that the moon doesn't make any immediate aspect today while it's in Libra, at least not a major aspect once it's in Libra. And so there may be a sense that you're applying to nothing. Where are you going? You want to go forward. You've got things you want to do, but quite where you're going with it all might not be immediately clear. And I suppose what I'd say, well, that doesn't necessarily matter. It may be that it's, to begin with, it's the journey that matters rather than the destination. And maybe once you've set out on the journey, at some stage the destination will make itself clear. But right now it's all about doing what makes you feel comfortable. And I think that you are feeling more comfortable than you were yesterday, because yesterday, of course, we had Venus square Saturn. We've still got Venus square Saturn, Venus, your ruler, square Saturn. It's still there, but that Venus square Saturn is just not as strong as it was yesterday. And so you might feel that some restrictions are beginning to alleviate. Now, when it comes to other people, you do have to get the balance right. It is a bit difficult. And so, in some respects, Libra, it might be best if you don't have people to worry about. If you are doing things on your own, because on your own you're in control. But on the other hand, you have to consider other people's presence. You have to know where they are, and you have to know when they can have an influence, when they could have an influence. And so you might want to create a path for yourself that stays clear from other people's influence. You don't perhaps want to be in a position where you have to explain yourself, because as soon as you start explaining yourself, you might find that you get bogged down and everything grinds to a halt. And also, Libra, we have a sesquiquadrate aspect between Mars and Saturn. And that Mars-Saturn sesquiquadrate could represent problem people. Mars rules Aries. Mars often symbolizes other people in your life. If Mars is sesquiquadrate Saturn, other people could create problems. They might try to limit your freedom. Or you might be aware of how frustrated and annoyed other people are. Some people do feel a sense of helplessness and powerlessness, and that might actually be the reason they are not appreciating you as much as they should be. So if you are in a situation where someone is undermining you or is trying to stop you doing what you want to do, you have to ask yourself why. Why are they behaving like this? And the reason they're behaving like this might be because they themselves are feeling completely frustrated and powerless, and they're perhaps trying to dump this frustration and powerlessness onto you. And Libra, that's obviously the one thing that well, many things you don't want to do. That's one thing that's one kind of position you don't want to be into. You should be looking for your own harmony, and your harmony, if you try to harmonize yourself with constant reference to other people, then that is actually a recipe for complete disharmony. So harmony has to come from within, and you shouldn't allow yourself to be in a position where someone else is dumping their frustrations onto you. But don't worry, Libra, I'm sure you won't allow that to happen. Scorpio. The big aspect today, I'm afraid, is Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. And sesquiquadrate is an important aspect. It's sometimes neglected. It's 135 degrees, 3/8 of a circle. It's a very dynamic aspect. So Mars represents you. It's sesquiquadrate Saturn. Saturn represents something which is holding you back, or is attempting to hold you back. And so Scorpio, it matters that you understand what this is. I mean, you should be in a position, ideally, where you do have complete freedom. I mean, that's the way it should be, but that's not necessarily the way it could be. So, what is holding you back? And it may be one thing holding you back is that you just have a few doubts about yourself. You ask yourself, are you good enough? Have you got the talent? Is there anything special about yourself? Now, these doubts are, in a sense, not reasonable. You shouldn't be having these doubts, because Scorpio, you are special, and you've definitely got something to contribute. And if you do have any doubts about your ability, you have two choices. Now, one possibility is to just say, these doubts are unreasonable, you're just being too self-conscious. Probably that's the way to go. Alternatively, if you have doubts that are genuine, perhaps there's one little thing that you can't do as well as you should be able to do, a bit of fine-tuning could be worth the effort. Because Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, it can be quite a difficult aspect, but at the same time it's quite a constructive and motivating aspect. It's quite gritty. And so in a gritty way, Scorpio, you can perhaps address something about yourself, some aspect of yourself, perhaps some aspect of your, what you can do, what you know. You address it in a very systematic way, and you put the work in, and you sort the problem out. Now, that is another way of looking at Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. It can actually be an aspect that can motivate you to actually find wholeness. But whatever happens, whatever you're feeling, don't put a negative spin on it. If you do feel that you don't have the capacity to do something, just be constructive about it. This feeling is not there just to make your life miserable. It's there it's probably okay to ignore it, but if you can do a little bit of work on yourself, that's all it takes. And so don't allow this aspect between Mars and Saturn to get you down. And as far as working on yourself is concerned, I think that with Moon moving into Libra, there's kind of some danger that, Scorpio, you might become a little bit self-indulgent, that you might just drift in your own world. You might feel that is the best way to feel at one with everything, just to drift, not to get involved in anything, and let things slip a bit. There is a risk there, and that's not something that really Scorpios like to do, because Scorpios like to stay focused. But there's a danger that things do slip a bit, and I think it might then be important that you make a special effort to bring things back into focus. Don't slip. Don't overindulge yourself in thoughts and feelings that are just going into a spiral of nothingness. That's absolutely not what you want. And I think at the very least, Scorpio, you need to give yourself one task today, at least one task that does require effort. And that, I suppose, goes back to what I was saying about Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. There's something you can do if you feel, for whatever reason, you haven't got what it takes. Bit of work, that is absolutely all it takes, and you'll be doing the right thing. And I think if you can do that, then I think that you'll start to feel a great sense of, or at least a growing sense of, wholeness. Sagittarius. People matter. That's true. I mean, people can't be ignored, but you don't want to give people too much effort. You don't want to put too much energy into your social life, for example. People are not everything. They're just a part of your activities. They are part of the scene. And I just think that there is some danger that you define yourself too much in terms of others, and you maybe forget about more important things. For example, who you are, what you can do, what makes you a real individual. Because I think there is a certain tension between you as a social being and you as an individual. I mean, I know that one is supposed to sort of define one's individuality perhaps by one's social environment, I suppose, if you take a social psychological view. But I think in a practical sense, there is a difference, and perhaps you have to tune into what makes you special. And in terms of other people, your thoughts about other people and your response to other people could, in some respects, be quite unrealistic. And so if you think something about someone, whether it's a nice thought, whether it's a bad thought, whatever it is, I'm not sure you can actually trust your thoughts. I mean, I think you might have got it wrong. And also, if you are talking to other people, I think you're somewhat vulnerable, or you're with other people, you are vulnerable to getting the wrong impression. And if people are telling you stuff that's not true, there's a danger you might actually believe them. And so I think that in many respects, Sagittarius, even though you're feeling quite sociable today, there may be a sense in which other people could actually be more trouble than they're worth, particularly if you're unsure of yourself. Now, if you're completely sure of yourself, you know what you want to do, you know what's important to you, you've worked it all out, it's all very clear, then I think that's a different picture. Then you can be with other people, you can talk to other people, and they're not going to cause any problems because you have worked it all out for yourself. But if you have any uncertainty in your heart, any uncertainty in your mind, then other people could be, whoever they are, could be your friends, could be your family, other people could be dangerous, because there's some danger that they lure you off the path and you start going into places that just could be a waste of your time, and perhaps could be a negation of who you really are. So put yourself first, Sagittarius. I think that really does matter. Capricorn. Today we have a sesquiquadrate between Mars and Saturn. I did talk a bit about it yesterday, but today that Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is exact. I think, as I said yesterday, today, Tuesday, is a bit of a continuation of Monday, because yesterday we had Venus square Saturn. Venus is still square Saturn, but we now have Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn as well, and that Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. I talked about it yesterday. I kind of gave a bit of a warning about it, that Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, it might make you a little bit accident prone. Perhaps you do something too hastily without sufficient thought, and maybe you get yourself into trouble. So that warning I gave yesterday still applies today, I'm afraid. But Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, it's not going to last forever, this aspect, but we do have to remember that Mars is moving slowly, and so Mars slowly makes this sesquiquadrate to Saturn, and you feel it over a number of days, and it can indeed be very frustrating for you. But it's tempting to see this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn as just in a purely negative way, and it's certainly not a fun aspect, Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. It does make things difficult, and it does make things make things more work than they should be, and so you might just feel that you're not particularly happy, and you do perhaps feel a little bit frustrated. On the other hand, Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn may in its own way be quite motivating. It may get you in touch with something, some aspect of yourself that you hadn't fully been aware of, and it may in a way unleash perhaps the rebellious side of your nature. I mean, Capricorns can be rebels. Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese rebellion, the Chinese Revolution, Mao Zedong, I don't know, it's now called Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, he was a Capricorn. He had his revolution. He did it over a long period of time in that Capricorn kind of way. What is it? You have the Long March led by a Capricorn. Who else but a Capricorn could lead this long march going round and round China to avoid the nationalist army, and then just keep going until in the end, in 1949, he takes power. So perhaps Mao Zedong should be your role model. I know there are other things about Mao Zedong, but perhaps are not quite so pleasant. But we cannot deny that he had a big influence. And of course, Mao Zedong, the Capricorns don't give up. Richard Nixon, he was a Capricorn. He lost the 1960 election against Kennedy, but he didn't give up. And in 1968, he became president. So don't give up. And that ability to keep going, I think, with Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is could be very helpful if you have the right approach. And you probably do have the right approach because you're a Capricorn. You use your energy in a focused way, and you don't get upset by temporary setbacks, and all the while you're making yourself stronger. People don't see that you're making yourself stronger. They might not even see you. They might not be aware of your existence. So you might have dropped off the radar, but you're still there. You are making yourself stronger. And, then, when the time is right, you'll be able to reveal yourself. And you are actually able to do something at the moment, which is, going back to this revolutionary theme, you have an idea that, or a view of the world which is quite revolutionary, that you actually privately do want to change things, turn things upside down, and you're actually prepared to work very hard at creating that change. And to begin with, people might not know what you're doing, but it's something you're working on. You're always working on it, and then when the moment is right, you'll be able to reveal your hand. Now that might seem a little bit dramatic, and so Capricorn, you have to look at what your situation is, what is the potential, and what would you like to happen, given the realms of possibility. But when I say realms of possibility, it may be that you think that things are impossible that actually are possible. So consider what it means for something to be impossible, and ask yourself whether it might actually be possible if you firstly believed in yourself, and secondly if you were able to sort of put in the work with sort of grim determination. Aquarius, we have a sesquiquadrate between Mars and Saturn. I mean, I've been saying this a lot, and I've just been saying it to Capricorn. And it does affect all of us. And I think it's going to perhaps affect you more than most signs, because Saturn is your ruler. And with Saturn sesquiquadrate Mars, there's something bothering you. It is an irritation, and it may be an irritation that could be related to another person. It's what another person is doing, or it just may be their attitude, and that might be somewhat irritating. Or it just may not be another person. It may be something you have to do, something you have to do, but you don't want to do it, but you are doing it, and it doesn't make you very happy. And I suppose you actually do have to continue with what you're doing, but perhaps you need to have the right attitude. It's not a long-term situation. It's just something that needs to be done, and once it's done, you're going to feel a whole lot better. And at the same time, Aquarius, it's very important that you understand your agency. It might be that with Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, you feel that there are things you just cannot do. But that's not the case. In fact, Aquarius, you are able to change things. You can actually turn things upside down. If there's something you don't like, and you've got a clear idea about how you want to transform it, then, Aquarius, I'm very confident that you can be successful. Now, it's not going to be an easy process, and it may not even be a popular process. There may be a sense in which people just aren't comfortable with what you're doing. You might be just a shock to some people's system, but if you feel it's important, then I suppose you've just got to go ahead with it. I mean, obviously you've got to work out whether or not it really is the right thing to do. There's no point in turning people's lives upside down just for the sake of it, but in some cases it might be necessary. Now, aside from that, we do have the moon moving into Libra, and moon moving into Libra, that's something which I think is to be welcomed. It's fortunate. Moon is moving into an air sign, and so with the moon moving into an air sign, there's a sense in which you feel you can breathe a little. Of course, when the moon moves into Libra, it does to an extent depend on your time zone, and if you're in Australia or New Zealand, for example, it's not going to move into Libra until late in the day. But in Europe and North America, the moon's going to be in Libra pretty much all day, and there is a feeling that things are moving, and that you can see possibilities. So possibilities are going to start to occur which perhaps you hadn't been aware of, and that's going to make you feel a little more comfortable. But possibilities on their own are perhaps of limited value. You actually have to work out how you can make something possible, and that means that possibilities have to be deconstructed. You have to sort of break up the steps required to make those possibilities real. So a little bit of analysis could be a good idea. And if anyone makes suggestions to you, then ask questions. Explain, how did you get from step A to step B? You've got to ask that question. And this particularly applies to any kind of idea or concept that comes from other people. Because in themselves, other people cannot 100% be trusted. You have to break down what they're saying. And whether they're talking about something very grounded, like, I don't know, money or business, or it could be something, I don't know, it could be someone knocking on your door trying to sell a particular religion to you. It might be some Mormons, for example. You've got to ask the Mormons to define themselves. I don't really have a problem with Mormons, to be honest. I do actually quite admire Mormons. The reason I admire Mormons is that they are so persistent. I mean, a Mormon goes on his 2-year mission, and it's a hopeless cause, isn't it? I mean, completely hopeless cause. They might get one convert in a 2-year mission if they're lucky, but the practice of just knocking on people's doors for 2 years must be really empowering. Maybe that's why the Mormons as a community are so financially successful, because they go through this mission. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Mormons. It's just an observation I've made about Mormons. For stranger, I haven't seen so many Mormons recently. But maybe it's since COVID. Maybe it's just here. But anyway, the point is, if you meet Mormons or anyone trying to sell you something, I mean, I know Mormons are not trying to sell you something, but they're trying to push a particular philosophy. If anyone's trying to sell you something, do ask some questions. And in fact, if you're trying to sell yourself something, that's something we sometimes do, isn't it? We have an idea and we're really trying to convince ourselves that idea is right. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, whether it's of yourself, whether it's of missionaries, people trying to sell you a financial product, whatever. Keep asking the question. Do not be afraid to ask questions. And if you ask enough questions, you'll get the answers you're looking for. And of course, the answer you're looking for might be someone is not able to answer your questions. In that case, you have a situation where you know for sure that this person doesn't know what they're talking about, or is trying to deceive or delude you. So Aquarius, I think it's a day when you can do things your way. Make sure you do ask a lot of questions, and don't be afraid of really pushing yourself with this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. That's the way to deal with it. It could be a little bit frustrating with Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, but I think if you handle it right, you can really throw your energy into constructing a secure and viable system for yourself. What that means, well, that's up to you to sort of work it out and to sort of make it relevant to your own life and circumstances. Pisces, as you know, the big aspect is Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. That is what is happening today. And that Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is likely to have an impact on you. Because, Saturn is moving through your sign. And it's been moving through your sign for a long time. It's very much sort of part of you now. It's sort of part of the scenery for Pisceans, having Saturn in your sign. Okay, Saturn does actually leave your sign next year, moves into Aries, at least from a tropical perspective, and sort of Mars comes along and makes a sesquiquadrate. In the first instance, that could certainly be irritating. you may feel a sense that your boundaries are being, I won't say threatened, but are being undermined a little. Something is irritating you. Something is not quite right. And you kind of want to push back against it. And, as a result, Pisces, you may actually come over as being quite defensive. You don't want people to get too close to you. And remembering also, we've got Venus making a square to Saturn. Now, that Venus square Saturn does give you a great sense of responsibility, but it might also mean that you don't want anyone to get too close, because that's Saturn. Saturn is a defense mechanism. And it's finely tuned at the moment, especially, of course, with Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. So don't take things too far, and don't assume a conflict without asking a few questions. Okay, maybe not asking a few questions. You don't always have to ask questions, but just listen to your feelings and just accept that not everyone is a problem. Though, to be honest, I suppose it's true that some people can't be trusted. And I suppose, actually thinking about it, there are grounds for being quite defensive today, in the sense that if you're too relaxed, if you take things too easily, there's some danger that you might believe what people say. Some danger. You've got this weakness that if you allow people to say things that you find appealing, that you find attractive, you might believe what they're saying. And in fact, the person you're dealing with, or it may not be a person, it might be a company, someone trying to sell you something, their view, what they're trying to push, could be very seductive. And so, in that sense, Pisces, I suppose you can't entirely trust your own judgment, especially if that judgment is being formed and pressurized by another person or by an organization. And so in that case, I suppose it would be very good if your defense mechanisms were at a maximum. But you have to be flexible. Not everyone is a threat. If people are not pushing something, if people are not trying to persuade you to do something, trying to persuade you to think something, or if they're just gaslighting you, if they're not doing that, then quite possibly they can be trusted, and you don't have to have your defenses at sort of a heightened state of alertness. Though Moon is moving into Libra, and with the Moon moving into Libra, Pisces, I suppose there is a sense in which you are taking things a little more seriously than usual. I mean, that's nothing to do with Libra really as a sign, but it's how Libra occurs to you as a Piscean, and how Libra occurs to you as a Piscean represents a certain amount of seriousness and a feeling that you need to be cautious, that perhaps you need to hold on to things. But you could be holding on to things too tightly and making things more complicated than they actually have to be. And so if you're involved, for example, in something, say, financial, don't overcomplicate it. It may just be a simple case of, is there a gain? Is there a loss? You've got all sorts of technical details, but maybe it's just, is it in your advantage? Is it not in your advantage? Perhaps it's just a question. Do the calculation. Look at the numbers. It's easy. Just don't overcomplicate things. I think that is going to perhaps be important today, and it's all about how you. It's also all about how you look at what's coming in and how you evaluate it. Some things are a threat, but a lot of things are not a threat, and it's just important that you're able to distinguish between the two. Okay, those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So, I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 42, which is increase. So increase gives us the idea of literally something increasing, getting more of something. And more of something, I suppose, if we want to be completely materialistic about it, that might be sort of more money, more possessions, could be more respect. And I suppose, but from a sort of I Ching perspective, which tries to be sort of more spiritual and about talking about the development of the character, it's about, increasing what is good about ourselves. What are our abilities, what are our talents, and what is our worth? And what makes us a unique individual? What makes us a special person? Because, we all have some unique role and we have to define that. And then once we've defined that unique role, we have to do what we can to intensify that role and make it really a part of who we are. And so you could say that increase is about increasing what is good, and of course reducing what is bad. So if there are things that are not relevant to who we are holding us back, negative thoughts, negative actions, negative associations, things that are just not in keeping with our destiny, then now is the time to get rid of them. I mean, that really is something that we should be doing. Now, there are two moving lines. The fourth line moves and the sixth line moves. And with the fourth line moving, it talks about someone who may be perhaps in the middle. There may be, for example, people who disagree with each other, people who are trying to negotiate with each other, and somehow we can act to make things work better. And I suppose we can be something of an intermediary. I suppose that's one way of looking at it. And so it's not just about increasing ourself, by the way. It's not a selfish hexagram. It shouldn't be. And it may be that other people are trying to do something, to get something off the ground, and we can be of assistance. And perhaps we can help people get on with each other. And maybe this is in keeping with the fact that today the moon moves into Libra. Libra is a sign about harmony and balance and people, getting on with each other. And so we can perhaps be the moon in Libra. So we can help people communicate and help people get over their differences. And of course there are differences, I think, because the Mars is sesquiquadrate Saturn, and that is a difficult aspect. And so there's plenty of reason for people to disagree with each other, but perhaps what we can do is help people to find their common ground. Now the sixth line moves as well. Sixth line does provide a warning. Very often in the I Ching, the sixth line is unfortunate. And there is a danger here that we focus too much on ourselves and on our own interests. And if we do that, if we're only trying to increase ourselves, trying to improve our own position, perhaps at the expense of someone else, and we forget about the community, we forget about the people around us, then things could go wrong. Then we could get ourselves into a conflict situation, or even if there's no conflict, we could almost destroy the very thing which we're trying to create. And so it's important to be socially and publicly minded, to think about why we're doing what we're doing. It's not just about ourselves. We're doing it for a higher purpose, and that's really what increase should be. And reminder, the I Ching is looking at things from a higher level. It's looking at, our own worth and, perhaps what goes on beyond our own life. We're just here for a purpose. We move on, but what are we supposed to be doing right now, and what are we supposed to be doing today? And there is this sense that we're doing things for everyone, and that is how we can make the most of this hexagram increase. Now, because we have two moving lines, this hexagram does shift, and it shifts to hexagram number 17, which is following. And with following, there may be a sense in which if we get it right, or if we are genuinely altruistic in terms of a previous hexagram increase, we don't just focus on ourselves, then people are going to respect us. And that's really important. And it's possible that through our own achievements, we can get attention, and we can get favourable attention, and we may actually have a chance to do something for someone else. Someone is looking for something, and we can find it. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about a lost object, but someone wants something, someone's got an issue, someone's got a problem, and they need us to sort it out. And it does seem that we can sort it out. And, we do this perhaps by, in the first instance, showing a little bit of gumption and responsibility, and we realize that something has to be done, and we go and do it, and we're successful, and we get recognition. But the recognition doesn't matter. I mean, not really. It's the fact that we've done something and we've made someone's life better. And I suppose if from a material perspective, if you're working under some authority figure, then, whatever, or I don't know, it could be at work, it could be, I don't know, in the family, whatever, someone who is above you, manager, leader, whatever, there's something we can do which gains us favor. And we go out, we find it, we can gain favour for ourselves through our actions. And now I want to look at Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, which is, I believe, the main aspect today. As far as I'm concerned, it is the most important aspect today. So this aspect I do not regard as being trivial, and so here is the aspect, Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, and it actually takes place in London at, I think, exactly at noon. I believe the clocks went back in Europe. So we don't, in Europe, daylight saving time is over, and so British summertime is over. Anyway, and I think that is at noon exactly in London. There is Mars's sesquiquadrate Saturn. And this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, as I've been trying to say, is a difficult aspect. And I would also really like to urge you to use semi-squares and sesquiquadrates in terms of interpreting natal charts and looking at transits. I mean, the problem about a sesquiquadrate is that they are difficult to spot unless you do a little bit of practice. The key thing with a sesquiquadrate is to think about the number 15. So here's Saturn, 1257 Pisces. So if you add 15 to 1257, it obviously turns to 2757, and so that makes it easier to spot the sesquiquadrate. But the way it works is that a planet if a planet is in mutable signs, you have to sort of add. And if a planet is between 0 degrees mutable and 15 degrees mutable, and you add 15, then it's 27, but then it goes to cardinal. And if it's if it's at, say, 16 Pisces, you add 15, and then that takes you to 1 degree of the fixed signs. I mean, it does. I mean, it takes a bit of getting used to, but you just keep going, keep looking at charts for a couple of days, and you'll get it. It's pretty straightforward, I think, in my opinion. But sesquiquadrates really do matter, and with an exact Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, it seems to me that it's a difficult day, and it's tense, and there could be some very real frustrations. But, when we have an aspect like Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, it doesn't affect all of us. Okay, it affects some people more than others, but it's something about the collective and what the world is like, and also, we have to think about who it is affecting. For example, famous people. But at its absolute worst, of course, Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is about death, because Mars and Saturn as a pair are about death. They're the death pair. But of course, in the vast majority of cases, Mars and Saturn is not going to be about death. It's going to be perhaps about frustration. That's one way of looking at it. But it could also be about hard work. I mean, it could be about being able to accomplish a great deal through one's hard work. But that hard work might not be much fun. So let's start off by looking at the Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn in terms of the 90-degree dial, just to show you what I mean. So 90-degree dial, just a reminder, conjunctions and oppositions and squares are shown as conjunctions, and semisquares and sesquiquadrates are shown as oppositions. So there is Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn on the 90-degree dial, and so that seems to me to be very clear. One thing about Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, and trying to understand it, is you can see a midpoint here, because this gives us a structure of Mars Saturn, and there's Uranus, and there is the Aries point. Aries point is shown as the 90. So this Mars Saturn sesquiquadrate is on the Uranus Aries midpoint, and so the Aries point is about the world at large, and Uranus is about it can be about revolution, it can be about upset, instability, and so that may say something about what's going on in the world. Now, sorry about that. So just reading what Alfred Witter says about Mars and Saturn on the Uranus Aries midpoint. Sometimes his interpretations, are really to the point. Other times he doesn't. He sort of seems to miss it quite. So he says, Alfred Witter says about the Aries-Uranus pairing, he says excitement and sudden events. And so Mars on the Uranus Aries midpoint, he says, is heedless or hasty actions, accident or attempt upon a person's life. So that's a bit difficult. And then Saturn, he says, events connected with a separation. So he's talking about accidents, breakups, separations, perhaps disagreements. So it's not easy, and that's what we've got today. So let's look at a few people who have this aspect hitting their chart. So one person is Elon Musk. So here's Elon Musk's chart, born June 28th, 1971. And Elon Musk has his midheaven at 2821 Aries. So what that means is that he's got Mars square his midheaven, and he has got Saturn semi-square his midheaven. So, assuming Elon Musk's birth time is really correct, because this is 7:30 a.m. So he could be born at 7:35. He could be born at 7:25. So we don't know for sure whether this aspect really is going to hit him. But if his birth time is right, then Mars square his midheaven could make him agitated. It could be something about his business. It could be something about his own aggression in terms of what he wants to do. I suppose he's got heavily involved in the Trump campaign. He was speaking at where was it, Madison Square Gardens on Sunday at this big Trump rally, and I mean maybe that's it. Maybe that's all it is. Mars square the ascendant, him presenting himself and roaring at the crowd. Maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe he's done it. Maybe that's all it is, and maybe all we're going to know is that over the next few days he's going to be throwing everything he's got into Trump's campaign. But there may be other things going on in terms of his career and his business that we don't know about. So that's something that we might want to consider. And the other person I put on the thumbnail was not just Elon Musk, but Ali Khameinei. Ali Khameinei, he is the supreme leader of Iran. And I don't know if he is the Iranian head of state, because the head of state is usually the president is the head of state, but is the supreme leader the head of state? I'm not sure. But you could say at some level Ali Khamenei does represent Iran. He is a personification of Iran. You know, presidents in Iran, they come and go. You have elections and they go, and it's a strange country, Iran, because it would be wrong to say that it was a dictatorship, and there is a certain level of democracy in Iran. I mean, I think people sort of in the West sort of jump to conclusions about what Iran is like. It's a lot more complicated from what people think, but he is the supreme leader, and as supreme leader, he has the sun at 28 Aries square Pluto. So that means for him, I suppose, that power is very important, being in control. I suppose not just in control of having control of the government, but I suppose in his case, I suppose it's about morality and regarding himself as a guardian of the country. And that Sun square Pluto gets activated it's activated at the moment in really quite a big way. I mean, if we look at Khamenei's chart, now of course with Ali Khamenei, I don't have his time of birth, so it's a shame. But so if we put Ali Khamenei in the middle and we put Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn on the outer wheel, so there is look at what Mars is doing at the moment. Mars is moving to the conjunction of his Pluto, and Mars is square his Sun. So that Sun Pluto is being seriously activated by Mars, and Saturn is sitting here. So Saturn 2757 Pisces is semi-square his Sun, and it's sesquiquadrate his Pluto. And this is all happening when we have had this sort of tit-to-tat war between Israel and Israel and Iran. It's kind of quite difficult to sort of follow it all, but Israel, I think over the weekend, had this big attack over on Iran, which apparently some said knocked out its air defense systems. And so, whatever Iran's public statements, the country is under a lot of pressure, and I think that Ali Khamenei is a representative of his country as the supreme leader, and you can see that this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is really hitting him, and of course it's Mars. He's got Mars opposition. Mars is about to be opposition his Pluto, and when Mars goes over the next few days, so Mars is going to be hitting his Sun, and Pluto's square his Sun. It is a difficult time for Ali Khamenei, and of course, as we already know, it's a difficult time for Iran. But I suppose skeptics would say, well, we knew this anyway. With this astrology, I'm just stating the obvious. Now, the person ordering these attacks on Iran is an old favourite, and that is Benjamin Netanyahu, born on October the 21st, 1949. We don't know. I don't know exactly what his time he's born, but I've gone for it. It seemed he's born late morning, and Benjamin Netanyahu's sun is at 2737 Libra, and so, in other words, Mars is at 28 Cancer, square Benjamin Netanyahu's sun. Saturn is at 13 Pisces. So it is sesquiquadrate his sun. So that Mars-Saturn sesquiquadrate is directly impacting Benjamin Netanyahu's sun. And so it's kind of creating a linkage between him and Ali Khamenei. So it's not surprising that this Mars-Saturn sesquiquadrate is affecting both Benjamin Netanyahu and Ali Khamenei. And, I don't know. It depends who you read, isn't it? I mean, I find it very difficult to work out to be honest, I find it impossible to work out what's going on in the Middle East, because who do you believe? Some people are saying that Iran is in real trouble. Other people are saying that Israel is in real trouble. You know what? I don't know. I don't know who to believe. Maybe they're both in real trouble. But certainly Benjamin Netanyahu is under a lot of pressure over the next couple of days. And of course, the pressure is going to be intensified by the fact that we've got the US presidential elections, and it seems to me that Benjamin Netanyahu is very much hoping for Trump to win. Now, continuing on a Middle East theme, we have the horoscope of King Abdullah II, who was born January the 30th, 1962. I always have a certain sympathy for King Abdullah II, because when I went to a boarding school in southern England, and he was King Abdullah II, because he's around my age, and he was in the same year as me. I think I was in the same class as him. I think I got on quite well with him. He wasn't there for very long, but that was when King Abdullah II was at school. That was the first time I saw a policeman with a gun. In the playground, because King Abdullah and his brother Faisal were at the school, and there was a detective. I remember seeing this detective. I don't know, it was like 1972 or something. There was a detective in the at the edge of the playground, and he had a gun, and that was quite, for a sort of a 10-year-old, that was quite. Remember, police don't have guns in the UK, so seeing a man with a gun was quite an exceptional thing. Anyway, King Abdullah II. King Abdullah II, he has his Mars at 2749 Capricorn, and Mars at 2749 Capricorn. So that Mars sesquiquadrate. That Mars at 27 Capricorn is going to be influenced by the Sun and Saturn. So let's show you. Sorry, by the Mars and Saturn. So let's show you what I mean. So there's Mars at 2749 Capricorn, and you can see that he's got Mars opposition his Mars, and Saturn is therefore semi-square his Mars, and he's got a very strong Mars in Capricorn, but that this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn does put King Abdullah potentially under a lot of pressure. I don't know what kind of pressures he's having to deal with. Well, I suppose Jordan is right next to Israel, so you could say that a lot of Middle East leaders, Khameinei, King Abdullah and Benjamin Netanyahu, are all having to deal with the consequences of this war, and it may be putting him under a lot of pressure, and there may be sort of internal issues. And I suppose you have to say, King Abdullah, it's a dangerous job being King of Jordan, so I suppose, over the next week or so, or maybe longer, he needs to be a little bit careful about security. That's something that he has to watch out for. So that's King Abdullah. I hope he's okay. I hope he sorts the issue out and he looks after himself. And turning to Canada. So Canada, I've already talked about Justin Trudeau. I've talked about Pierre Poilievre. Sorry, I'm sure I've made a complete mess of his name. Then there is the Deputy Prime Minister, who is Chrystia Freeland. You don't remember her? Big fan of Ukraine. Real hawk, wanting to put everything into NATO's proxy war against Ukraine. And she's got her Mars at 28 Cancer. So in other words, she has got Mars, she's got Mars opposition, she's got Mars, she's got Mars opposition Mars. Sorry, let me get this right. She's got Mars return. So she's got a Mars return, and she's got Saturn hitting her Mars, so by sesquiquadrate. I mean, Mars, I suppose you could say that's a men in her life, the Prime Minister's in her life, Justin Trudeau, but it may be that she is under a lot of pressure as Justin Trudeau is under a lot of pressure. So she's very much part of the government, and so this Mars in Cancer is very much being activated by Mars, by this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. And finishing up with the Biden regime, the White House press secretary. I don't think I've looked at her chart before. She's born on August the 13th, 1974. Karine Jean-Pierre. Karine Jean-Pierre, she has her Venus at 28 Cancer. I suppose Venus 28 Cancer, how she relates to people, may say something about her private life, maybe nothing to do with her public life, but still she has got Mars conjunct her Venus, and she's got Saturn sesquiquadrate her Venus. So I don't know what she's doing, if she's having to field questions and protect her president. Questions arise. She may find the whole thing a little bit difficult. And finally, well, I have to, can't I? I mean, I have to look at her chart one more time. Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris is certainly affected by this aspect. So here is Kamala Harris's chart, and let's just put the sesquiquadrate next to her chart. So you can see with Kamala Harris, there's her Sun-Moon opposition. And I mean, I mentioned this yesterday, but I just want to go over it one more time, just to remind us how important this Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus is. Mars is square her Moon, Mars is square her Sun, and of course Saturn is semi-square her Moon, and it's sesquiquadrate her Sun. So that Sun, and of course it's Saturn is opposition her Uranus. So this Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is hitting the main thing in her chart, that exact full moon. And I don't know, I mean, it may just be further evidence that things are really going bad for her. And I don't know, maybe she's going to be a really difficult person to be around. I've heard it said that she uses the F word quite a lot, and I think she's going to be under a lot of pressure at this stage, and I think that this whole Saturn aspect to her Uranus, which is such a big feature of what I think is going to be her defeat next week, is that's what it's all about, this Saturn. And I think this is another trigger and just a reminder of just how badly things are going for her. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for today. The Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, yeah, I think it is an important aspect, and it's an aspect that we do have to really watch out for. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.